Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a cool review for you from the brand Peren watches. Now, these are Swiss-made watches, and they're actually a brand really placing a focus on being perennial, hence Peren, really wanting to last or exist for a long or infinite time, enduring or continually reoccurring or being everlasting. So I think one of their first earlier models were this kind of Transylvania vampire theme, which was, I think, a little maybe overly niche. But now they've really kind of turned it into, I think, they've made an amazing pivot into just a really solid tool watch that is very different than what you'll find out on the market, and different in a lot of really good ways, which is not always the case. A lot of times you can find watches that are really far out there, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you kind of want to buy them any more or less. This particular type of watch is a dive watch, although it does have that traveler's bezel insert on there. Some key common characteristics and design language. You're looking for a dive watch. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. What we have here is the Peren Nera Rogue X, and it's limited to 300 pieces. The Nera watch pretty much originates from a declassified, abandoned Tornik Ravel tribute gone rogue, hence the Rogue. So, for those of you that aren't super savvy into dive watches, basically Tornik Ravel and their TR 900, that whole thing, it's really just kind of a story that goes back to military issue dive watches, and essentially the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, and Blancpain essentially being able to kind of get around some of the regulations in terms of gaining those contracts. They had to be American, so what some very smart character did, started a company and was importing these Swiss-made divers essentially and rebranding them, and then that way they kind of still were able to go around some of those requirements. So that's a little history lesson on the inspiration, but the whole thing was overhauled essentially, and the result is this very distinctive Swiss watch with very unique features. The fluted conical rotating bezel is a singularity in the watchmaking industry, offering supreme grip and maneuverability, while the automatic in-house regulated movement provides reliability in extreme conditions up to 200 meters or 660 feet under the water. So you can get these for about $500 USD directly from Peren, and I think there's a nice little value. So this was quite a long intro because I rambled on, I think, a bit about kind of the start of this, but I wanted to get that out of the way because I think where they ended up is way more important than kind of where they started. So with that, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, check it out. So first thing is this dial. This is actually a dark teal dial. It's a bluish green hue. And as you look at it, sometimes you might be seeing like a forest green. Sometimes you might be seeing a deep navy blue. Sometimes it might appear black. And I think that's already the first thing that kind of jumps out at me. And it's a matte kind of satiny finish there. Like, it's not glossy, there's no metallicness to it, so it really plays with light in a very particular way. Another thing is you're going to get a lot of different finishes on here. That might be not great for some folks, but I don't mind it. I actually find it to be quite charming actually. So it has a fully blasted case, and then you can see the black coated bezel. Let's get the action on it. Ooh, yeah, that is nice, and that's really easy to grip. The ergonomics on this is, ooh, very nice. Cool. And then you can see that steel brushed bezel insert is brushed, right? Versus here we have the matte. And I'll say the levels of finishing on here, it does remind me of my Zen. Let's say my U50, which is all matte. I mean, of course, that is tegimented, so there's some additional things that are going on with that particular finish. But in terms of like the blasting finish on here, it is really, really crisp. You can even see how crisp everything is on the case back here, which is really nice. So this is really well done. Like a lot of the times when you get something that's matte blasted, it can be a little bit harsh and it can feel a bit porous. This actually feels quite smooth to the finger, which means that they really did a very fine job. And I personally dig the contrast of the brushing. You see the way that it's grabbing the light and playing with it. You can see there's some highlighted areas that are kind of that steel gray, while other areas are in the low lights, and then they kind of get almost like a black color, which does tie into the grip. Oh, this is nice. It's just that nice blend of clicky and smooth. Because sometimes you get stuff that's very notchy, and then stuff that's just like super smooth. This is a really, really good balance between the two. I dig that. So in terms of like tactility, when you're interacting with this piece, that's nice. The grip here on this crown is very nice. It's signed. You got drilled lugs, so you can put this on a lot of different things. I think the colorway is actually really cool because this bluish green, that teal color does go really well with this band, although it's like in a color range where I typically wouldn't wear, just because it's kind of a bit close to my skin tone. As you can, it almost looks like the watch is floating on my arm there. I think it looks really cool. It kind of gives me this overland, vibe, kind of Land Rover aesthetic in terms of like the colorways and just the really tool industrial nature in terms of the design aesthetic, which I really dig. And again, $500. That's pretty good. Swiss made. It's original, although it kind of started out as an homage to, one of the most basic and kind of first mass-produced divers. I shouldn't say mass-produced because technically I feel like Zodiac was probably more mass-produced. But I'd say one of the first kind of modern divers, right, with a dive bezel and that very simple aesthetic. Here you still get a lot of that echoed, but of course they just, they really modernized it. So I think that's kind of cool. I feel like that's what a lot of older brands have done, right? They started off kind of copying Blancpain, copying Rolex and the Submariner, and then slowly tweaking their design language years and years and years. But for a new brand, they didn't want to just start from nothing, so they kind of started with the classics and started modernizing from there. So I think that's pretty cool. I mean, maybe not the most organic way to design a watch, but I think it's, at the end of the day, it arrived at a great place. 39 millimeter diameter, which is a great size for this watch. Only 12.8 millimeters thick. It doesn't feel super thick. A lot of it has to do with the visual weight on this very thin mid case, and then you get, of course, a nice little undercut here on the mid case, and then you get a very small, barely bubble back on this screw-in case back. And then basically the combination of the screw-in case back and that undercut really offset the thickness on here, almost kind of mirroring that piece, in terms of how, I guess, the visual weight of it. And then you get to this actual, this bezel. It's cool, and like I wouldn't design this myself. I know this is like way more bezel turning than most of my videos, but it's not just the action, it's the grip. It's the, like, I wonder if I could even just like do this with one finger. Oh, that's how well it grips. I don't even need the other, I can just, ooh, and then I get two hands, and then just two fingers, I should say, sorry. And then it really gets fun. No, but yeah, it's pretty addictive. Fidget factor wise, I'm really digging this design. I think aesthetically, it didn't really speak to me at first, but getting it in hand, like, this watch really surprised me. It really jumped out at me, and it's not my typical thing. I'm not really into green. You know, it's mixing all these different colors and everything, but somehow, man, does it come together. Wow. I'm sorry. I've been a little sidetracked. So let's get back into some of the specs. Sapphire with, you know, it's flat. It has 3 layers of AR coating, so you can see it's really negotiating these reflections really, really well. It has an automatic Sellita SW200 inside, case back solid and etched there. Same type of bead blasted finish. Getting back to this dark teal dial, has that matte finish on it. Very nice, very handsome. Holds the light in very different ways than you would get from like a sun ray, or, you know, any type of like vertical brushing or anything like that, any type of metallic coating. So it just has something, there's something kind of fun, and again, it's very utilitarian. This feels, although it's Swiss made, it just gives me German vibes in terms of kind of its simplicity and its, you know, it's kind of functionality and kind of form function blend, I will say, which, you know, I think that's what I really enjoyed German watches for. So that's, I guess that's kind of cool that this kind of is, I feel like it's tickling those same senses. Now the indices on here, I believe, are printed, but they do have some pretty nice thickly applied little lume plops on there, as you can see, and then, you know, you do get the little graduations all marked out, and it's nice because it all lines up and ties into the bezel. Of course, you get the date at the very traditional 3 o'clock, but it is color matched, so it's really well integrated. Look at that. Like, it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb or anything like that. It's just there. Some of you were like, oh, it should be at the 6 o'clock. You know, it could look good there, sure, but I do like the symmetry of the logo at 12 and that text, and then the text down at the bottom. Oh, what is that? Is there a little, there we go. Let's just clean that off. So yeah, I'm digging this piece, guys. Look at that. The color fade on that, and I think hopefully this really shows well when we get into the lume shots and kind of low light transition of it all. But 20mm lugs, again, exactly what you want for a strap monster. And the nice thing is, with this sealed case back, you should have no hesitations of putting this on a really nice NATO strap or something like that. The vintage leather that's supplied, I think, is very nice, soft and supple. Genuine leather, signed, all the goodies there. The buckle is brushed and signed as well. It's milled here, and then this is folded, but, you know, not too shabby from that perspective. So let's actually get this on wrist and see how it wears. All right, guys, check this out. Yes, the colorway on my skin tone, a little too matchy, but I think in terms of the kind of color palette and color play that they have going on, I like that it's typically mostly subdued colors, but they just do play off of each other well. That black bezel, that dark teal dial, the kind of little pop of that mustardy font there on the Nera name, and then it kind of ties into this really nice kind of well-worn strap. So you can see that it does lay very nicely on the wrist. Also, there's like some nice slopes that happen, whether it be from that bezel or from the lugs, how they have a nice slope to them, which really do help lug the wrist or hug the wrist, so that the lugs aren't extending the case out or making it seem like it's sitting on top of the wrist. It's more so really wrapped around it, and it helps everything feel quite secure and really just quite natural on the wrist there. So it's sitting really nice. And yeah, I mean, the specs wise, this is really cool. It's a dive watch, but it feels like it could be absolutely an everyday sports watch, that kind of adventure type of watch, especially with that brushed feature on the bezel insert. And then you also do get, you know, that 12-hour traveler's insert, so that you could, you know, offset, let's say, your hours. So now you'd be an hour ahead, 2 hours ahead, 3 hours ahead, right? Which is pretty cool. I dig that. And then also give me an opportunity to just turn this bezel again, which I think we've already identified I enjoy doing. So with that, let's actually get this off the wrist, get into some low light transition, lume shots, and closing thoughts. All right, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. BGW9 Swiss Super Luminova, very clean, very clear. Sure, the 12 o'clock cardinal position doesn't really stand out. So you are going to have orientation based off of your wrist. But you can see there with the bezel lined up, it does give you some nice reference if you're only using it to tell time in the dark. And then also that seconds hand, it does have that loomed tip, which is great and does keep things quite legible. But one thing I like to do when it comes to these lume shots is even get in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight like my hot studio lights do a good job of kind of simulating. You might be mostly spending your time indoors, walking underneath an overhang, maybe the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it is nice to see what this watch, in terms of its kind of textures, its colorways, how it all renders in less than optimal lighting. So these mixed lighting conditions are really telling in terms of how the watch will render in person. Even if we get into some harsher lighting conditions here, very high contrast, typically that would expose any type of defect within that finish. But you can see that brushing, everything is very uniform on the way the light glides over the bezel. And then even when it comes to that fine matte finish there on the case and crown, everything again very uniform, very predictable in the way that the light is rolling and gliding over everything very, very nicely. So, and you can also see that kind of in that mixed lighting, it's still quite legible. That BGW9 stands out. The dial is quite dark in the dark, and the bezel is also quite dark. So maybe not the greatest for trying to figure out, travel time in the dark, but when it comes to just telling time, I think you'd be good to go. And then if you want to keep track of another, time zone while you're wearing the watch, then you definitely want to do that while you're in a well-lit room, so that you can take a look at the kind of inscriptions on that bezel insert. So on the wrist wears really great, surprisingly at home on that supplied leather strap. Like, I'm not actually in a hurry to change that out. I feel like there's a part of me that would expect to, like, oh, I really would want to throw this on some type of NATO or nylon strap. But I'm actually really digging it kind of in its current form that it's in, which is really surprising for me, because you guys know that colorway on that strap, it's just too close to my skin tone. So typically I would be in a hurry to get it off that strap. So the fact that I am kind of digging it the way it is probably more of a testament to the eye of their design team in terms of them figuring out what goes well and what pairs well together. In terms of model variants, there's a Nera Rogue, there's the non-X version, which has a more traditional dive time bezel insert. And then in terms of comparable models, there is a ton of competition in the kind of well-spec'd $500 diver space. But not too many options, I think, with this level of design originality. And then also, this is Swiss made, right? So if that means something to you, then great. If it doesn't, then probably not a big deal. But it does have a Swiss movement, which does have that higher beat rate, so 8 ticks within that sweep per second, which is preferable, I'd say, in most cases. So that is something that, as much as you might not believe in Swiss made, in terms of just general quality, I think that's something, the smoother the sweep, typically the better. So people do enjoy that as more of an objective value add. And yeah, I mean, it offers a lot. Bottom line, the Nera Rogue X is a quality timepiece that really grows on you. It grew on me in a very short period of time. It's really not a design aesthetic that you would go out looking for by any means, but it's definitely one that stays with you once you have seen it and once you have found it. Like, I would like to see more stuff that looks like this, that's just doing something a little bit different, but not in a weird way, in a really balanced and well thought of kind of way. Like the designs, they were taking calculated risks. It wasn't just an oversight in terms of, oh, well, I'm pairing this with that. Like, I think there was just an extra level of care that was given, and I think also an extra level of courage to really do something a little bit different and take some make some bold choices and take a little bit of risk and understand that you might be turning some people off to this watch by making some of those choices, but at the same time you're also appealing to a nice audience that's out there that wants to see something a little bit different, something a little bit more refined, something that thematically comes together as more than just kind of the sum of its parts and specs, that comes together as as its own little timepiece. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.